I was born to be the peak of humanity. On Earth, I was the strongest SSS rank hunter, an unbeatable force of necromancy who kept the gates at bay. Yet, I was betrayed by the very friends and guild members I protected. Fearing my growing shadows, they united forces from various guilds to murder me in cold blood. Just before dying, I swallowed a mysterious stone I had stolen from the guild leader, a relic that promised a second chance at life. In my final moment, I unleashed the final barrage of my undead army, and I died. "Young master, you're alive?" The servant sobbing pulled my dazed mind back to reality. I looked at everything in disbelief. One guy was bolting out the door screaming, "It's a ghost!" Hadn't I died from the betrayal? Why was my heart beating normally? After coming to my senses, I dragged myself to a mirror and froze. I had been reborn. I stood there stretching my cheeks, wondering how anyone could spend their entire life just eating and sleeping. I was now Shin, the notorious fool of the Bacon clan in ancient China. Suddenly, screens flooded my vision. Unexpected error. Player's level reset to 1. All abilities blocked due to class difference. I actually felt a wave of relief. No monsters, no gates. Since I was a prince, I figured I could finally live a lazy life and die of old age without the bloodshed of my past. But I was being naive. My moment of peace was shattered when the door was flung open. Eugene, my younger brother, came storming in like he owned the place. My servant tried to stop him, but Eugene delivered a powerful punch to the poor guy's face, sending him to his knees. "How dare a mere servant touch me?" he yelled. I walked past Eugene to check on the servant, ignoring the prince entirely. I didn't even know who this brat was until the servant whispered his name. Then an old man entered, Elder Woonsun. Instead of helping, he and Eugene started cracking jokes at my expense. "Look at this stupid pig," they laughed. "He's finally lost his mind along with his memory." They treated me like a harmless animal, but they forgot one thing. I might be in a fat body, but my soul is that of a killer. I jumped up with a surge of energy and delivered a devastating slap that sent Eugene's head spinning. He stared at me, face turning red, screaming about what I was doing. "It was a slap," I said. "Are you too stupid to understand something that simple?" Eugene grabbed his sword, but I let my S-rank aura leak out. Even at level 1, the weight of my past life was enough to make his hands tremble. He stood there drenched in sweat, paralyzed by fear, until the elder dragged him out, muttering that I'd truly gone insane. But as soon as they left, a surge of pain hit my head. A flood of memories washed over me, and the reality of this life became clear. Eugene didn't just bully the original Shin, he poisoned him in his sleep. He murdered me to take control of the clan. And the worst part? He was sleeping with my own fiancé. They were laughing about my death while I was still cold. I'm sitting in the corner now, and realizing the mistake I just made. I wanted a peaceful life, but I just slapped a man who has already murdered me once. My servant was still hovering over me, asking if I was okay. I was still a mess, but I didn't have time to sit around crying. I asked him straight up, "Is there a place nearby where a lot of people have died?" I needed a graveyard or a battlefield. Somewhere I could harvest enough power to actually defend myself. Meanwhile, Eugene was back at the main house having a complete meltdown. He was busy smashing vases and cursing my name because I had the balls to slap him. He wanted me dead right then, but the elder told him to pipe down. He'd already made preparations to deal with me. Hearing that, Eugene started laughing like a complete psychopath. These guys think they're playing chess, but they have no idea they're up against a former S-rank king. I decided to head to a forbidden battlefield, a place where a massive war happened hundreds of years ago. For a necromancer, this place is basically a gold mine. But getting there, that was the real struggle. I reached the top of the mountain panting like a dog, but one look at the ground made me smile. It was worth the suffering. I could sense the auras of powerful undead everywhere. In my prime, I would have taken the strongest ones, but at level 1, I could only handle the white ones, the weakest spirits. I slammed my hand down and activated Death Key Extraction. This yellow aura started surging into me, and man, it felt like being set on fire. To absorb a spirit, you have to endure the exact agony they felt when they died. A normal person would have snapped, but for me, this pain is nothing. After a few hours, the system dinged. Level 2. My stats jumped up and I finally unlocked Death Summoning. But I wasn't done. I sat down and forced my mana to circulate toward my heart. It felt like a million needles were stabbing me from the inside, and blood started leaking from my mouth, but I didn't stop. In my world, most idiots store mana in their brains, but that's how you get your mind corrupted. So I store mine in my heart. After a brutal struggle, a blue mana ring formed. Skills unlocked, mana control, and mana heart. I stood up and gave the command.
Arise.
A magic circle appeared, and a skeleton crawled out of the dirt. The system called it a low-rank skeleton. It wasn't exactly an army, but it was a start. I ordered it to attack, but after just 4 swings of its sword, the thing crumbled into dust. I realized the problem immediately. The mana in this world is trash. It's not even 1/10 of what I had on Earth. My mana was draining faster than a leak. I didn't waste another second. I put my hand back on the ground and spent the entire night extracting every bit of energy I could find. A couple of days later, I tried to get back into my room, but Eugene had put guards at the door. I had to sneak around to the back and climb through the window. I got stuck halfway through, once again, cursing this fat body, until I finally squeezed inside. The room was dark, but I sensed a shadow. I didn't hesitate. I activated a protection circle, flashed behind them, and grabbed their mouth, ready to snap their neck. Then I realized it was my servant, Wang. "What are you doing in my room without permission?" I demanded. He was shaking and breathing hard. I thought Eugene had turned him into a spy, but then he looked at me and asked, "Are you going outside again?" I tried to lie, but he called me out. He'd seen me sneaking out every single night. I realized then that the kid wasn't lying, but instead of reporting me, he told me to follow him. I have no idea where he's taking me, but it looks like the foolish servant has his own secrets. Wang led me to this old, rotting shed at the edge of the estate. Once we were inside, he kept telling me to relax, saying nobody ever came to this dump. I didn't fully trust him yet. I was still looking for a trap, but then he started shoving a massive wooden box across the floor. Underneath it was a huge hole that led straight out of the house. Wang looked at me and said, "I could use this to sneak out whenever I wanted without the guards seeing me." He didn't even ask where I was going. He just said he wanted me to stay safe. Look, I was stuck. If Eugene or that old fossil found out Wang was helping me, the kid was dead. I had to know if this was a setup. I put on my serious face and asked Wang if he knew how much trouble he was in. In my world, you don't just trust people, but I told him I'd give him a chance if he was willing to trust me back. When I said that, he looked like he'd just won the lottery, but I'm an S-rank necromancer. I don't live on good vibes. Suddenly, I gave him a creepy look. My eyes went wide, and I grabbed his head before he could move. I hit him with my hypnosis spell. I needed the truth. First, I asked about Eugene. Wang was shaking as he told me Eugene just beat him up every time they saw each other. Then I asked why he was helping me. He called me master and said I was the only person who was ever kind to him. He told me we were like brothers since we were kids. When his parents died, Eugene and his stepmother bullied him constantly. Back then, the old owner of this body used to hit Wang because he was frustrated, but Wang just took it, hoping for a better day. When he thought I died, his whole world fell apart. He wasn't going to let me go again. I snapped my fingers and broke the spell. Seeing him rub his head from the side effects actually made me feel something. I crawled through the hole, told Wang to stop worrying, and thanked him for the help. I spent the whole night grinding until I finally hit level 10. My necromancy jumped to rank D, and I unlocked a few new toys: bone armor, shadowbind, and evil eye. Plus, I could finally summon 2 skeletons at once. But honestly, I was annoyed. These were all support skills. I started wondering when the hell I'd get my real attack spells back. At level 10, the system finally let me pull out that blue energy. But when I looked at it, I noticed something weird. It wasn't just mana. It was mixed with a different energy, the same stuff I felt on Eugene and the Elder. I got curious and decided to absorb it. As it hit my body, I felt like I was being shoved into a furnace. At first, it seemed smooth, but the second I tried to mix this new energy with the mana in my heart, all hell broke loose. They started clashing like 2 bulls. The pain was insane. Blood sprayed out of my mouth, and it felt like my insides were being put through a paper shredder. I was 100% sure I was dead. I had one move left, a massive gamble. Even though I was in agony, I forced a smile and started pushing that mysterious energy down toward my stomach instead of my heart. After hours of literal hell, just as I was about to black out, it worked. The system told me I'd successfully stored the energy in a new spot in my gut. It was called Kai, and I had just inhaled about 30 days worth of it. I had to test this. First, I summoned a normal skeleton using my mana. Then, I tried to summon a second one using the Kai. As the ki flowed through me and mixed with my mana, I gave the command,
Arise.
What crawled out of the dirt left me speechless. This wasn't some basic pile of bones. It was a terrifying samurai skeleton. I stood in the middle as my two summons faced each other. I checked the stats and almost lost it. This thing's stats were way higher than mine. And the best part? This skeleton could actually use martial arts to fight. I decided to let them spar. With a flick of my finger, the axe-wielding skeleton charged. He jumped high, aiming for a kill shot, but the samurai didn't even flinch. He moved like a shadow, dodging every single hit with perfect martial arts moves. The axe skeleton launched a total attack, but he couldn't even touch the samurai's armor. Suddenly, the samurai's eyes glowed. He dashed forward, and he disarmed the axe skeleton in one move. Just as he was about to finish my first summon off, I stopped them and shut it all down. After I canceled the summons, I pulled up my status window to check the damage. We'd been sparring for a good while, but the samurai skeleton had only burned through 10 units of ki. My axe skeleton? It barely touched my mana. Then it hit me. Fusing my mana with Kai was making my summons incredibly efficient. But here's the problem. Mana grows back on its own, like a slow battery recharge. Kai, not a chance. To get that back, I have to literally suck the energy out of dead bodies. In my old life as an S-rank king, I had corpses piling up everywhere, so it was easy. But in this peaceful mansion, it's not efficient. I realized right then that if I wanted to keep using these high-tier summons, I needed to learn how to generate my own Kai. I needed martial arts. I couldn't help but smile. Things were finally getting interesting. The next morning, I tracked down my servant, Wang, and asked him point blank where I could learn some real fighting moves. He asked me what kind of style I was looking for. I looked him dead in the eye and asked if there was a martial art that could let me steal an opponent's ki. Wang nearly had a heart attack. He scrambled over, telling me to keep my voice down. Apparently, stealing energy is considered a demonic art. In this world, if you're caught even talking about it, they'll chop your head off. He started lecturing me like a worried mother, but honestly, I didn't care if they called it demonic or divine. Power is power. I let out a huge yawn while he was still rambling. Does this place have a library or what? Wang told me there was one. Then what are we waiting for? Let's move. Wang's face fell. He told me servants weren't allowed inside the martial arts library. I felt for the kid, but I didn't let him stay down. I told him straight up, when I take over this clan and become lord, I'll teach you every martial art there is. Before I left, I had to know. I asked him who the badass man in our clan's history was. He told me it was my great-great-grandfather, Lord Yulang. 200 years ago, they called him the one-man army. He reached the zenith superior rank. As I walked toward the library, I started doing the math. The power ranks in this world go from third rate at the bottom up to second, first, saint, zenith, and finally transcendent. My samurai skeleton is only a third rate, and it's already a beast. I started feeling a bit worried. If a third rate is this strong, how much of a monster is a transcendent? I needed to find out the power gap, and fast. Walking through the estate, I could hear the staff whispering. They were all gossiping about how I wasn't at the bars or chasing women anymore. I didn't get mad. I actually smiled. Since I formed that second mana storage and absorbed the Kai, my senses have sharpened like a blade. I could hear every word they said perfectly. Plus, here's the thing. My reputation is already so trash that it can't get any worse. That's a superpower. It means I can do whatever I want, and nobody expects anything from me anyway. Finally, I reached the library. There were 3 guards at the door, looking bored. When they saw me, 2 of them started snickering. The lead guard gave me this mocking grin and said, "What brings you here, young master?" I rolled my eyes. "It's a library. I'm here to read. Now move." One guard with a mustache stepped forward, blocking my path. "I don't think we have the kind of books you're looking for, pig." He started laughing, and I could tell what he was thinking. He thought if he insulted me and kicked me out, Eugene would give him a promotion. I just sighed. Everywhere I go, there are these little bugs interfering in my life without knowing their place. I didn't back down. I stepped right up to his face. He looked at me, totally shocked. When I tried to walk past, he actually had the nerve to grab my shoulder. I gave him a side eye. That would have made a demon tremble. My eyes started glowing a deep, bloody red as I gave him a literal death stare. The guy broke out in a cold sweat and froze like a statue. I calmly peeled his hand off my shoulder and walked right into the library. He was just trembling, begging for someone to save him. See? Once you've seen the eyes of an S-rank king, you don't just walk it off. To him, I wasn't a fat prince anymore. He saw a tiger ready to rip his throat out. The fear hit him so hard that he actually wet his pants right there on the spot. I didn't even have to lift a finger, and the other guards had to drag him away to the clinic. At least one of them had the brains to realize that, fat or not, I'm still a direct descendant of this clan. While I was busy taking over the library, things were getting creepy in the shadows. Deep underground in a hidden bunker, one of the clan elders was meeting with a bunch of guys in red robes. Around him, there was this body wrapped in bandages, like a mummy. The elder told them I'd entered the library, but he wasn't worried. He thinks I'm just a naive young master who could read every book in the world and still be useless. That's exactly why they picked me for their little plan. One of the red robes even joked that it's better if I do try to learn martial arts. One tiny mistake in training, and your energy backfires, killing you instantly. They pointed at that mummified body and laughed, saying their preparations were done. The elder ordered them to pull the trigger on their plan tonight. Back at the library entrance, they swapped in 2 new guards. One bald guy was complaining that I'd been in there all day, just flipping pages. The other guard just told him to shut up and let me rot. Here's the kicker. They were laughing because they thought there was nothing left for me to learn. They thought the only thing left in there was adult comics. Idiots. They don't realize that as a necromancer with a system, I don't need to practice for years. I just need to read the data. But look, I'll give them this. The selection was trash. I scanned every shelf for hours, and the best thing I could find was a first grade book, which is basically bottom of the barrel quality. I was about to settle for that garbage when a little cart full of books bumped into me. I turned around and saw this tiny, cute girl. She was terrified, crying and apologizing like I was going to eat her. She told me the cart was full of damaged books she was supposed to dump in the basement. I had a gut feeling, so I told her to lead the way. We spent hours digging through the trash in the basement, but it was mostly useless junk. Then, the girl handed me one more book. She looked so worried, asking if it was even okay to learn from something so broken. I patted her head and told her if she found me a good one, I'd give her a massive reward. She got all excited and brought me this book that looked like it would turn to dust if I breathed on it too hard. But when I checked it with the system, rank, unknown. In my world, unknown means one of 2 things. It's either complete garbage, or it's so high level the system can't even wrap its head around it. I started studying the book, and suddenly, this creepy green energy exploded out of nowhere and wrapped around my body. It started forcing its way inside me. For a second, I panicked. I couldn't stop it. Then the system dinged. Warning, an unknown source has applied a curse of death on the user. I knew exactly who did this. Eugene. The guy is obsessed with me dying, but then it hit me, and I started laughing like a madman. For a normal human, this curse energy is a death sentence. It kills you instantly. But for an S-rank necromancer, this isn't a curse. It's a free buffet. Cursed energy is literally the fuel I run on. After a brutal session of sweating and pushing my limits, I managed to form my 3rd mana circle. In my world's terms, I've officially hit B-rank hunter status. Not bad for a guy trapped in a body who gets winded walking upstairs. But I wasn't done. I spent hours grinding away at that damaged book the girl gave me. The pain was like being stabbed repeatedly for a whole day, and man, it paid off. To my shock, it wasn't trash. It was a transcendent level skill. With this, I can cultivate Kai faster than anyone in this kingdom. By the time the morning sun started hitting the floor, I'd already hit level 15. Suddenly, Wang bursts into the room looking like the world is ending. He tells me I need to move fast because some important guest is here. When I asked who, he got all quiet and admitted it was my fiancée, Jumi. So anyway, cut to Jumi walking through town. The locals are losing their minds over how beautiful she is, calling her one of the top 3 beauties in the kingdom. But here's the thing, it's all a show. This guy in the crowd trips and splashes mud on her dress. Her massive guard is ready to kill the poor guy right there, but Jumi stops him. She acts all sweet, gives the guy some money, and asks if he's okay. The crowd is cheering, thinking she's an angel. Inside, she's literally gagging. She felt like a worm touched her skin and couldn't wait to burn those clothes. Meanwhile, back at the meeting hall, the air was thick with tension. Eugene, his uncle, and the Vice Lord were all sitting there. Eugene was staring at the empty clan leader's chair like he already owned it. He's convinced I'm a corpse by now. The only guy in his way is the vice head, Dojin, because he's actually loyal to the leader, and, by extension, to me. Then the doors swing open, and the second elder, Daeyong, walks in. They sit down and start chatting with the vice head, completely ignoring Eugene. I could see Eugene's face turning red from the disrespect. Finally, Eugene's uncle gets tired of waiting and says we should start. Dojin insists they wait for me. Eugene scoffs, "Why wait for a loser who's good for nothing?" Right on cue, I walked in. "Who's the loser?" You should have seen the look on Eugene's face. He and his uncle looked like they'd seen a ghost. I could see the gears turning in Eugene's head, wondering how the hell I survived his lethal curse. I casually dragged Wang into the hall and took the seat next to the Vice Lord. Then, I told Wang to sit right next to Dojin. The room went silent. Then the fourth elder lost his mind. He started screaming about how a dirty servant isn't allowed to sit with the high and mighty elders. Wang was shaking, begging me to let him leave. I didn't blink. I looked the fourth elder in the eye and asked him, "What seems to be the problem?" He exploded. "The problem is you brought this filthy servant into our meeting." I didn't shout. I just let my S-rank aura leak out and said, in a voice that shook the floor, "Do I need permission from you for what I'm allowed to do?" The fourth elder literally jumped back. He'd never seen me like this. The whole room was terrified. I leaned in and asked again, "Do I need your permission or not?" He started stuttering like a kid. No, you don't." Eugene tried to save face, claiming I was just unwell and needed my servant close by. Then, Jumi finally makes her grand entrance, flanked by her guards. Eugene started flirting with her, and she acted all shy and blushed. It was pathetic. But then her guard stepped forward with a smirk and dropped the bomb. As of today, their clan is cutting ties with us. No more alliance, no more trade. The room went absolutely nuclear. Daeyong slammed his fist onto the table so hard I thought it would snap, screaming about how they could just dump our alliance without a warning. But the guard didn't flinch. He just looked at us with pure disrespect and said, their leader didn't want to deal with a third-class clan that couldn't even pick a boss. Right on cue, Eugene starts acting like he's heartbroken. He started yapping about how all our problems come from not having a leader, basically pointing his finger at me and saying, "It's all this loser's fault." The guard doubled down, telling us that maybe, if we fixed our leadership disaster, they'd think about talking to us again. The Vice Lord was sweating. He knew we were weak and desperate for their support, but his only options were Eugene, who's a snake, or me, who everyone thinks is a total failure. It was a mess. Then the guard starts talking about my engagement to Jumi, but before he could even finish the sentence, I let out a massive yawn. I looked him right in the eye, stuck a finger in my nose like I didn't have a care in the world, and dropped the bomb. Actually, I'm the one breaking off the engagement. The room went dead silent. Jumi looked like she was going to explode. Her face was turning purple because she couldn't handle the loser rejecting her first. Look, the second she walked in, my head started throbbing. I got hit with a flood of memories from the original Shin's life. In the beginning, she acted all sweet and innocent when she proposed. But the second the engagement was official, she turned into a monster. She called him a revolting pig and threatened to cut off his manhood if he talked to her in public. And after the old leader died, she started seeing Eugene while the original Shin watched from the shadows, crying. But then, I saw something else, a vision of the future. I saw her looking completely broken, covered in red, with her clothes torn to pieces as guards dragged her away. It hasn't happened yet, but as a necromancer, I know a premonition when I see one. I'm guessing I'll see more of this as I level up. Back in the room, Jumi was shaking with rage. I stuck a finger in my ear, looked at her, and joked, "What's the matter? You're not answering. Don't tell me you're still obsessed with me?" Her guard started screaming about how I dared to insult his lady. Surprisingly, the second elder actually stood up for me. Amidst the shouting, I just looked at the elder and asked, "Why is everyone so mad? They came here to dump me, and I just said it first. What's the big deal?" Black Bear was losing it. See, he knew if word got out that a loser rejected their princess first, his own boss would have his head. He started leaking this massive, heavy aura, aiming it right at me. It was so thick that Wang, my servant, could barely breathe. But me, I didn't even blink. Black Bear is a zenith-level martial artist, and he was baffled that a pig like me wasn't collapsing. He cranked the pressure up, trying to crush me, but suddenly, a white aura exploded from the vice head and canceled it out. The vice head stood up, eyes glowing, and told Black Bear that if he wanted to keep going, it was officially a declaration of war. Even though the vice head is old, he's still top 10 in the kingdom, and Black Bear knew it. He started backpedaling immediately, claiming he wasn't hostile, just angry on behalf of Jumi. Yeah, right. He was trying to kill me. That's when Eugene saw his opening. He told everyone that because of his stupid older brother, the whole clan was about to lose its best ally. He proposed that if we elect a new leader, meaning him, we can save the alliance. And then, he pointed at me with a snake-like grin and said that since I started the fight, I should settle the grudge with Black Bear in a duel. The vice head and the second elder looked like they were watching a train wreck, but Eugene, that snake, was internally dancing. He figured this was the perfect setup for a tragic accident to get rid of me for good. Black Bear loved the idea. He smirked and agreed immediately. My servant Wong actually grew a spine for once and shouted that this was insane. I mean, think about the logic here. How is a guy in a body this out of shape, who hasn't even trained, supposed to fight a zenith-level monster? The vice head and the elder backed him up, calling Black Bear shameless for even accepting. But Black Bear just taunted me, calling the future leader a coward. He even said he'd let me off easy if I got on my knees and begged Yumi for forgiveness. I didn't say a word. I just stood up and started walking. Everyone thought I was going to crawl to Jumi and beg like a dog. Eugene was basically vibrating with joy, waiting for me to humiliate myself. Wang and the elders tried to grab me, but I just kept going. Then, I did something that broke everyone's brain. I walked right past Jumi and Black Bear like they were invisible, and headed straight for the outdoor stadium. I stretched my arms out, feeling totally annoyed. I'm an S-rank king, and I'm tired of all this pointless talking. I turned around, looked at the confused crowd, and pointed at the arena. Let's fight. I've been itching to kick some ass. Word spread like wildfire. The whole town rushed to the stadium to watch the loser prince get wrecked. The second elder's son was panicking, saying we couldn't let this happen because Jumi's guards are all high-level killers, but the vice head stopped him. He's a warrior, so he knew that if we backed out now, my reputation would be permanently dead. He'd rather I fight than live as a coward, and honestly, I agree. He told everyone to relax. If things got too dangerous, he'd jump in and save my skin. As I was yawning and stretching, the elder was basically writing my funeral speech. He thought the winner was already decided. But look, I was just getting warmed up. I walked into the stadium, noticing Jumi acting all worried for the crowd. I couldn't help it. I looked at her and said, "Nice acting. You should be an opera star." Black Bear told me to shut up, but the vice head reminded him no martial arts allowed in this duel. It was supposed to be a test of raw strength. Black Bear scoffed, and then did something that really annoyed me. He sent one of his underlings to fight me instead of doing it himself. I pointed my finger right at him. "I don't want to fight your little minions. My opponent is you, Black Bear." The crowd gasped. Black Bear laughed and told me to pick someone on my level. I just shot back, "Oh, so you're admitting you're weaker than me?" Before he could explode, the referee started the match. In a rage, Black Bear used telepathy to tell his guy to kill me. The minion lunged with a massive punch, but I moved like a ghost and dodged it easily. Back on Earth, I fought monsters faster than sound. This guy was moving in slow motion. He threw a whole barrage of strikes and I just danced around them. Black Bear was screaming at him for playing around, but the guy was actually trying his hardest. Finally, the minion lost his cool. He broke the rules, activated his martial arts, and swung a full power punch at my chest. The vice head stood up, ready to save me, but then, crack. Instead of me hitting the dirt, the underling screamed in pain. His hand was completely fractured. Eugene thought I hid a steel plate under my clothes, but his uncle knew better. He realized I had actually learned real martial arts. Black Bear tried to call me a cheater, but the crowd shut him down. Everyone saw his guy use martial arts first. Look, Black Bear was stuck. The crowd was already calling him out for cheating, so he had to play it cool. He offered a fake public apology and admitted his minion lost, but then he shouted that the show wasn't over. He claimed that since I was the one who asked for the fight, it was only fair that I face him now. The vice leader was fuming, but Black Bear twisted the logic. He said that since I'd shown I actually knew some martial arts, the fight was officially fair. The second elder and the vice leader weren't buying it, but I stepped in and told them it was fine. I looked at Black Bear and called him a teddy bear right to his face. I told him he talked way too much, and to hurry up so I could finally kick his tail. Black Bear stepped onto the stage, looking like he wanted to swallow me whole. He warned me I'd regret this, but I just laughed. Everyone who's ever told me that ended up face down in the dirt. He lunged at me, but I was gone. He started throwing a massive barrage of punches and kicks, but I just slipped them all. I'll be honest, he was fast. His speed was basically around a D-rank hunter back home, but for a former S-rank king, that's nothing. He tried to catch me with a nasty sidekick to the face, and the vice leader actually gasped because it was a kill shot, but I just blocked it with my wrist like it was a fly. Black Bear was losing his mind, wondering how a loser was dodging a Saint-grade martial artist. The crowd started turning on him, whispering that maybe he wasn't as strong as he claimed if he couldn't even hit me. That sent him over the edge. He dashed in, trying to grab me in a blind rage. Big mistake. I countered with a punch powered by my deathly aura. I hit him so hard, he went flying backward and tumbled across the stadium like a bowling ball. I stood there, holding up a victory sign, while the crowd went absolutely wild. But Black Bear wasn't done. He touched his mouth, realized he was missing a tooth, and his face went purple. He activated his full martial arts power and charged at me like a bolt of lightning. The light from his punch was so bright it blinded everyone. When the dust cleared, Jumi saw a body flying through the air and crashing at her feet. It was Black Bear. The vice elder had stepped in and blocked the hit. He shouted to the whole clan that these people just tried to murder their young master. Suddenly, everyone was pulling their swords, ready for a full-scale war. Jumi completely lost it. She dropped the sweet girl act and called our clan bugs, screaming about how we dared to point swords at her. My clan members finally saw her true colors. That temper of hers could kill a man just by looking at him. The second elder demanded they hand over Black Bear for trial. But before he could finish, a head went flying through the air. Someone had beheaded Black Bear in one clean swipe. It was a middle-aged guy with claws like razors, the infamous Blood Claw. This guy is the top dog of Jumi's clan, a high-ranking Zenith practitioner. Even our vice leader, who's a beast himself, started sweating because he knew he couldn't beat this guy. The vice leader told me to get behind him, promising to protect me. I just looked at him, totally annoyed. Who's protecting who? I can take care of myself. You should worry about your own neck. He was stunned. He didn't expect that kind of talk from me. Meanwhile, Bloodclaw was standing there licking Black Bear's blood off his claws with a sick smile. He released this massive, suffocating aura, basically begging for a war to start. But then, Eugene jumped in. He started acting like a peacemaker, saying there was a misunderstanding and that we shouldn't start a war over a small matter now that Black Bear was dead. Eugene was internally panicking. See, if a war started and Jumi got hurt, she'd definitely expose their secret alliance to save herself. He was trying to protect his own skin, but the second elder wasn't having it. He raised his voice and made it clear. He wasn't letting these people walk away that easily. But I stepped in before things turned into a bloodbath. I called out from the back, "Let them go." Everyone froze. They couldn't believe their ears. Here I was, the guy who almost got executed by the Gayam clan, acting all calm and forgiving. Honestly, I wasn't being a saint. I just figured they'd learned their lesson, and I had bigger fish to fry. Plus, the look on everyone's faces was priceless. They were actually starting to respect me, except for Eugene. That snake was boiling. He hates it when I'm the center of attention. Before Jumi stormed off, she pointed at me and screamed that she'd get her revenge. I just let a wicked smile slip. Good luck with that. Later that night, deep in the jungle, two groups met in the dark. It was Eugene and that guy Bloodclaw. Eugene was losing his mind, screaming about how the plan failed. Bloodclaw tried to play it cool, saying they didn't expect me to actually fight back, but he promised to finish the job and kill me tonight. Eugene looked relieved and promised to clear out the guards so they could sneak in. He's so desperate to be the leader that he's literally selling out his own brother to a bunch of assassins. As they left, a tiny shadow creature crawled out of the dirt and followed them. They had no idea I was watching the whole time. Back in my room, Wang was practically begging me to go see the vice leader. He kept saying the old man saved my life by blocking Black Bear's hit. Look, I didn't want to hurt his feelings, but even if the vice leader hadn't stepped in, I would have blocked that pathetic kick myself. My instincts are still S-rank, even if this body is a tank. But then Wang got all emotional. He told me his heart sank when I stepped into that arena. He was terrified of losing me again. It actually hit me pretty hard. Back on Earth, my own blood brother was the first one to try and put a knife in my back. Here, This servant actually cares if I live or die. I told him I was sorry for making him worry. He was shocked I'd apologized to a servant, but I told him he's more than that to me. After he left, it was time to get to work. The second the door closed, that shadow from the jungle crawled into my room. It's one of my summons, a shadow parasite. It's basically a living security camera. It projected the whole meeting between Eugene and Bloodclaw onto the wall. Now I knew they were coming tonight. My first instinct, go find them and rip their heads off right now. But I had to be smart. I didn't know how many soldiers Bloodclaw was bringing. I needed an army of my own. I looked out the window at the dark mountains and knew exactly where to go. It was time to visit the graves. I headed straight to Death Valley. I held out my hand and gave the command.
Arise.
Out of the dirt came a skeleton wielding a spear. This wasn't a normal pile of bones. It was a Kai-infused summon. Thanks to that transcendent skill I found in the library, I've been leveling like a madman. I'm already level 22. With all my stats over 150, I've gathered over 5,000 units of Kai, which officially makes me a Zenith-level martial artist. I didn't stop at 1. I summoned over 10 of these elite skeletons. For the first time, I have close combat skills to back up my necromancy. In my past life, I was a glass cannon, strong magic, weak body. Now, I'm both. Finally, I found what I was looking for. A lone grave at the back of the valley, vibrating with a massive, heavy aura. The name on the stone, Lord Yulang, the founder of our clan and the strongest swordsman in history. My heart was pounding. I raised my hand, poured my Kai into the ground, and shouted,
Arise.
But the system slapped me in the face. Just as I started the ritual for the first leader, everything froze. A notification popped up, saying the guy was way too powerful for my current level. I'm at B-rank necromancy. Back in my prime, that would be plenty to pull a transcendent soul from the dirt. But this guy, his rank was just a question mark. It means he was so strong, even the system can't categorize him yet. I had to leave his grave behind, feeling like a failure. I needed a Zenith-level undead now to handle Bloodclaw, or I was toast. But then, the ground started shaking behind me. I turned around and saw a red summoning circle glowing like crazy. The system went haywire, telling me an undead was summoning itself. It didn't care about my low level. It wanted to come out. A skeleton crawled out and just sat on his own gravestone in the coolest pose I've ever seen. I checked his stats. Level 30, everything over 200, and 5,000 Kai. The system warned me his power was capped because I'm weak right now, but he was still a monster compared to me. Then he moved. No command, no nothing. He walked right up to me, and I felt his thoughts invade my brain. This Shin is an interesting lad. Before I could react, he grabbed my chest. For a second, I thought he was attacking, but then it hit me. He was choosing me. Suddenly, a surge of energy ripped through my body. The system chimed in. The skeleton warrior is transferring the 12 swords of the Thundercloud God technique. I didn't hesitate. I accepted with a grin. If the dead want to give me their ultimate moves, who am I to say no? Meanwhile, Bloodclaw and his group were marching through the woods. They stopped to rest, but Jumi started throwing a tantrum. She was screaming that she didn't want to wait. She wanted to see me die painfully right now. She even kicked one of her own soldiers. Bloodclaw tried to explain that the men were exhausted, but Jumi just mocked them, asking if they were too weak to kill a loser like me. Bloodclaw's claws came out. He was clearly done with her mouth, and he ordered the march to continue. Everyone was miserable, but then the air changed. A terrifying aura slammed into them. Bloodclaw dove to protect Jumi just as a spear whistled through the air and pinned one of their men to a tree. The guy died instantly, still shaking. Bloodclaw looked at the weapon and realized something was wrong. The spear was made of solid bone. Before they could breathe, a barrage of bone spears rained down from the shadows. It was a massacre. Men were being impaled left and right. Bloodclaw was screaming at his idiots to use their Kai to deflect the spears, but by the time they got their act together, half their army was already dead or bleeding out. Bloodclaw lost it. He roared into the trees, demanding the coward show his face. I stepped out of the dark. Who's the coward? The guys who came in secret to murder me in my sleep? Bloodclaw was stunned. He couldn't figure out how I knew they were coming. I just laughed. Did you really think I was an idiot? I know exactly who's under those masks. You're Bloodclaw, and that screaming girl in the back is Jumi. Bloodclaw tried to play it off, saying they were on a secret mission. I didn't let him finish. Yeah, a mission to kill me. Let's not play games. Jumi started screeching that Eugene had betrayed them and set a trap. She told Bloodclaw to just kill me now, but Bloodclaw was actually using his brain for once. He was looking around, terrified. He'd seen the amount of spears I'd launched, so he figured I must have an entire army hidden in the trees. He kept scanning the area, but he couldn't sense a single soul other than me. He was stuck, wondering if I was some kind of tactical genius, leading a ghost army, or if I was just a lunatic who came here to die alone. Bloodclaw finally convinced himself I was a one-man show. He figured I'd just set up some traps and was hiding behind them like a coward. With a nasty grin, he ordered his men to tear me apart in the most painful way possible. I couldn't help but smile. It feels like ages since I've seen some real bloodshed. As they charged, I tapped into my rank B bone spear skill. In my old life, this was child's play, but in this fat body, it actually took a decent chunk of my mana. Spears erupted from the ground, skewering his men one by one. Panic hit them immediately. They started screaming that this wasn't martial arts, it was demonic arts. I just laughed. If you're scared of this, I haven't even started yet. Internally, I was actually a little annoyed. Using a rank B skill over and over is a drain, and I had to use it because every single one of these guys was a first-grade martial artist. Bloodclaw finally lost his temper, releasing a massive aura that snapped all my spears in midair. He scoffed, calling it a childish trick, and told his men I was probably out of gas. They got their confidence back and started marching again. That's when I let the mask slip. Who said I was alone? I extended my hand and shouted,
Arise.
Glowing skeletons started clawing their way out of the dirt right in front of them. The look on their faces, pure gold. They were trembling, staring into the empty eye sockets of my soldiers. I folded my arms and grinned. Now you can call it a demonic art. Even Bloodclaw started sweating. He's been a killer his whole life, but he'd never seen anything like this. One of his guys tried to bolt, and Bloodclaw killed him on the spot. Trapped, they screamed and charged my skeletons. I just shook my head. So, you've chosen death. From behind me, a skeleton archer emerged and started picking them off with perfect aim. Bloodclaw realized that every single one of my skeletons was as strong as a first-grade martial artist. He knew he couldn't win a war of attrition, so he decided to go for the head, me. He dashed toward me, charging up a kill shot, but he fell for it perfectly. I'd made myself look defenseless just to lure him in. Right before he reached me, a massive strike hit him from behind, splitting the ground in half. It was the spirit of the first clan leader. Bloodclaw was covered in sweat, realizing he'd walked right into my trap. He looked at me and gasped, "You're a reincarnation of a demon." As my skeletons closed in and started pinning him with spears, he didn't even scream. He just started laughing like a lunatic. Once the field was clear and everyone was dead, I summoned their souls, including Bloodclaw's, to check later. I had a much more annoying problem to deal with first. I walked over to Jumi. She looked like she was about to have a heart attack. I reached out and ripped off her mask. She immediately started crying, calling me darling, and claiming Eugene had brainwashed her. She looked so innocent, sobbing about how we were lovers and should start over. Honestly, if she were on Earth, she'd be a top-tier actress. Then, she showed her true colors. Thinking I'd fallen for it, she pulled a hidden weapon and sprayed a death curse gas right in my face. "A pig will always be a pig," she sneered. I didn't even cough. Cursed gas? To a necromancer? That's like giving a fish more water. I lifted my middle finger, pressed it right against her chest, and looked her in the eye. One thing I love about this world? I don't have to worry about the law when I kill someone. I tapped into my power, and a surge of pain ripped through her. She fell to the ground, clutching her chest as her body began to rot and melt away. I'd placed a specialized curse on her. As she died a slow, painful death, I left a name tag next to her that simply read, Jumi. I stood up and looked toward the mansion. Jumi was done. Now, it's Eugene's turn. A few days later, Eugene is just losing it. He's slamming the table, screaming at everyone because he still can't figure out how he lost. Meanwhile, Jim and Elder 1 just sat there, staring at Jumi's body. They knew right then I was the one messing with them. Eugene saw the name tag I left on her and started sweating. The guy was close to a total meltdown. Elder 1 finally told him to shut up and go get a drink to clear his head, and Eugene just walks out like a ghost. But once he's gone, the vibe gets dark. The other two start plotting to burn the whole area down just to find me. They're calling it a holy war now. They even doubled the curse they were sending my way, thinking it would finally break me. Honestly, I'm glad they did. Back at my place, the noise was getting to be too much. Wang was getting totally mobbed. It was a disaster, with people literally jumping on each other to hand him letters for me. I told him I was dipping for a few days, and that he had to stay and act like I was still inside. I waved and left, but the poor guy looked like he was gonna cry. He didn't want to be there alone. By the time I reached the mountains, the noise was finally gone. I found a cave to meditate, and right on cue, that black curse energy came crawling in. I didn't even move. I just let it hit me. My power filled up instantly, and my healing sped up like crazy. Since the curse was feeding me this much, I needed to know how far it actually went. I spotted a dead boar nearby and figured, why not? Might as well test my power. I tried to pull a skeleton out of it, but this white thing pops up instead. It was an ugly, hunchback creature with long claws. Seriously, even for a summon, he was gross. I almost wanted to kill him again, just so I didn't have to look at him. Anyway, I looked at this skeleton and told him to just hand over the martial arts already. The thing just looks at me. Nothing. Then the system hits me with a secret task called Wish of the Dead. It's a pain. Apparently, in this world, the dead don't give up anything unless you settle their grudges first. This guy actually wanted my hand as a sacrifice just for some blood claw skill. I just laughed at the nerve of him. I showed him who the real master was by letting my dark flames crawl over his bones until he was rattling. I didn't have time for games, so I called out 2 more skeletons and let the first one sit there in pain while I talked to the new guys instead. That's when it clicked. I could basically strip the skills off any warrior as long as I finished their tasks. I realized I didn't even need their basic garbage anymore, so I sent them back to the void and moved on. But man, this body, it's a prison. A little while later, I'm in the dirt, breathing like a broken engine and covered in sweat. It's pathetic. The ancestor was just standing there with his arms folded, looking at me like a total amateur. I forced myself up, legs shaking, and told him I just needed one more shot. I focused everything. My hands were covered in lightning, and I swung for a thunderous slash with every bit of strength I had left. I looked at the ground and nothing. Barely a scratch. I just wanted to curse. The gap between these skills and my actual strength was a goddamn canyon. I thought it was just my energy, but it was deeper than that. The ancestor must have seen me struggling. He suddenly walked up and started poking my back. It freaked me out for a second, but then I felt it. He was pointing out every mana circle I'd been ignoring. I sat down right there in the dirt and opened every single one of them. I didn't care if it was a risk. I just let the energy flow. That's when the floodgates opened. System messages started screaming at me. My level was jumping, and skills like Corpse Explosion and Soul Barrier were unlocking one after another. Anyway, Dojin was back in his room, trying to meditate. The guy was a mess, gritting his teeth and covered in sweat, just trying to hold himself together. He looked like he was hanging on by a thread, but when Daeyoung knocked and walked in, Dojin tried to play it off. He actually made some joke about skipping dinner, but Daeyoung wasn't having it. He just stood there with his head down, looking at the old man like he was watching him die. He knew Dojin overdid it during our fight, and honestly, the tension in the room was thick. They started talking about the clan and the Red Cloud faction, worried about who was going to lead the next expedition. Dojin just closed his eyes. I found out later he was thinking about me, comparing me to the Emperor Yuho-Yol. I didn't wait for an invite. I just walked right in while Daeyoung was mid-shout. They both jumped up and started bowing. They start offering me snacks and acting all formal. I told them to forget the food. This body is already a disaster. I need to lose weight, not eat more. Dojin laughed, but Daeyoung just stared at me. I could tell he thought I'd been out wasting money at a casino or something. I didn't bother arguing with him. I just went straight to Dojin and told him to stop the act. I could see him using his Kai just to stay upright. I told him flat out, if he didn't stop, he'd be dead by tomorrow morning. Daeyoung flipped out, telling me to watch my tongue, but I ignored the noise. The old man was lucky I showed up when I did. I sat him down and started moving my energy into his back. A second later, he was coughing up blood all over the floor. Daeyoung tried to jump in, but I gave him a look that sat him right back down. I felt the dark energy inside Dojin, and it was nasty. I have no idea how he kept that much poison inside him for so long. If I had been even 10 minutes later, he would have been cold. It actually made me stop and think for a second. I don't get why guys like him or Wang put themselves through this much hell for other people. It just doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, I started moving my energy into Dojin's body. I was basically just copying what the ancestor did to me back in training, but it worked. It's funny, really. I never thought a necromancer like me would spend his time playing doctor. I sucked the last of that dark energy out of him, and the result was better than I expected. Dojin just sat there, glowing with this pure blue aura. Daiyong was standing off to the side, with his mouth hanging open. Right then, he knew his buddy hadn't just recovered. The old man had actually advanced. Taking that curse into myself turned out to be the best move I made that day. My yin mana shot up instantly. While they were busy staring at Dojin, I was just sitting there feeling smug, watching my levels jump. Dojin eventually came over and bowed, telling me he was forever in my debt. He wanted to know how I even knew he was poisoned. I didn't feel like explaining the technical side, so I just told them I knew because I'd been poisoned too. That really set them off. Daeyong started hitting the floor in a panic, so I had to stop him. I told them it wasn't actually poison. It was a curse. They asked who told me about it, and that's when I decided to lie. I looked them right in the eye and said it was my father. They couldn't believe it. I kept a straight face and told them my father figured it out too late. Instead of chasing the killer, he spent his last days looking for a forgotten legend. When they asked why I hadn't told anyone else, I just leaned in and asked, "Who can I even trust?" That shut them up. I pulled my blade out slowly to let the tension build. I told them he'd found a miracle, a power that destroys everything in its path. I stood up and let the energy flare off the sword. Dojin was actually shaking. He recognized it immediately as the 12 thunderbolts. Daeyong even started crying. It was a bit dramatic, but it definitely worked. Looking back, I understood why the technique disappeared. The ancestor was a beast, but he never left instructions for the next generation. He wanted a clan of traitors, not killers, so the art just turned into a myth. But standing there with that sparking sword, I knew I had them. If I'm the only one with the legend, I'm the only one worthy of the throne. Anyway, I felt a little bad for using my father's death to sell the story, but it got the job done. I just stand there, watching these two clan heads absolutely lose it. They were sobbing and shaking, making all these dramatic vows about avenging my father and atoning for not believing in me sooner. Honestly, it was a bit much. I just stood there for a second, looking at them and thinking about how I was going to play this. Anyway, I decided it was time to show them what they were actually signing up for. I told them I had a proposal, but first, they needed to see something. I gathered every bit of strength I had and just let my aura rip. The room practically shook. I was mixing my mana with that sage art, and the look on their faces was priceless. Daeyong looked like he'd seen a ghost, and Dojin was just staring at me, probably trying to figure out how a fat prince could put out that kind of raw energy. Dojin even started comparing my power to the Emperor of the Bold, some legendary warrior he met 30 years ago. I didn't feel like giving a long speech, so I just cut to the chase. I looked them both in the eye and asked them to join me. No fluff, just the offer. They didn't even hesitate. Dojin pledged himself as the vice chief, and Daeyong swore his faction would do whatever I asked. They both dropped to one knee right there. I told them to stand up, thinking to myself that the Beacon clan was finally going to be worth something again. But then, something felt off. I didn't say a word, I just jumped. I smashed right through the roof, grabbed some guy hiding in the rafters, and slammed him into the floor. The guy was good, I'll give him that. He had those professional surveillance techniques that usually bypass even the best senses. Dojin ripped the mask off and recognized him immediately. He was one of the Red Clouds, someone they'd known for over a decade. I leaned over the guy and told him to go back and tell his master I was coming to break his neck. But the guy didn't even blink. Foam and blood started leaking out of his mouth, and I realized he had a poison pill hidden in his teeth. He was dead before Daeyong could even reach him. Right then, we all heard a noise coming from the shadows to the right. It was clear we weren't alone anymore. I just took a step forward and told the person that they might as well come out and tell me their business in person. So yeah, the three of us just grabbed our gear and moved out. I wasn't in the mood for any more uninvited guests.